Good morning, everybody. I'll call the meeting to order, or back to order. We did recess on April 4th, as you recall, from Committee of the Whole, and today is a continuation of that meeting. It is not a new meeting, and I will reiterate that as a continuation of the Committee of the Whole of Tuesday, April 4th, a reminder that this is Committee of the Whole meeting and no decisions will be made here this morning. There will only be recommendations that will go to the regular council meeting that will be held this afternoon, commencing at 1 o'clock, and those items will be for consideration. So moving on in our agenda from those things which we didn't get to on April 4th, the first item up is item 4.4, which is report ML 2023-001 short-term rental, and I'll turn it over to Manager Sloan to give us an overview of that report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to council. So last time we met, I did a PowerPoint presentation. There's numerous deputations, and the report is outstanding. In the report, I presented options to council and a bunch of other topics. So I provided a background. Short-term rental has been a topic since 2017. Council has previously received petitions, public surveys. We've had public meetings to discuss it and research the topic. The current resolution before council is to monitor and track complaints and then report back with options to regulate and license. That's why we're here. So the short-term rental market, as previously reported, there was between 600 and 800 within the city of Kawartha Lakes. Council was provided an updated information at the start of this meeting on April the 4th. We are now up to in the neighborhood of 1,000 short-term rentals. So the market is increasing. There is a demand. Some of the key themes that were brought forward are short-term rental owners are reluctant to the suggestion of regulation. The public is generally supportive of regulation, and the PowerPoint and the report presented a more detailed approach to what the key themes are. Stats, council has received stats from 2019 to up to current within that report as well. So the stats are based on calls to service generally, and generally what we're responding to kind of across a broad spectrum that we classify short-term rentals. What other municipalities are doing? So council has previously received that information with mapping included. Sorry, just back up. I mapped it out now to see what other municipalities are doing, and I didn't previously include it in the report, but I'll just speak to it quickly. The mapping, when we look at the 85 municipalities that are thinking about or already have short-term rentals regulated in some way, if you can picture it in your mind, it branches out from Toronto, comes up 400, comes up Highway 11, along the other 400 series highways, out of the metropolitan areas, centered around cities and centered around our lakes. So it is becoming an industry that is kind of moving to the peripheral of Toronto. What I did provide in the report was a spreadsheet attached as an appendix that details all of those municipalities. So the options currently to council are continue with the current practice, which is increased nuisance regulations. So we've enhanced the number of bylaws and service fees around that. I've offered an option to license, presented a draft bylaw, We could also look at it through zoning regulation, and we could look at it through a prohibition bylaw. So each option comes with specific operation impacts. So considered our staff, budget, equipment, etc. So council has been provided also an FAQ document based on some of the information presented from the deputations and some of the questions of council. You should all have a copy of that now. So just in conclusion, the short-term rental conversation is certainly been a large topic for council to consider. So thanks for your time in this.
Thank you, Manager Sloan, and thank you for all of the work that you put into this and the documentation you've kept track of and the public meetings you held as well. I think that we have heard from the public on this, and we've also heard from folks in the short-term rental business. So I think it's now up to council, and we'll get some questions or comments from council. And I think Councillor MacDonald, you're up first.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, and to you, Mr. Sloan. I also like to also say that this report is, a lot of work has been gone into this, and there's a lot of good information. You know, it tells us all the offenses, page 10, 11, 12. It tells us the occurrences. It tells us really everything that we really need to do to go forward. So a good report for sure, without a doubt. Lots of good ideas there. But I do struggle, and I'm concerned with some things that are on this, and this is why. So I don't know if I have to make a motion, but I'd like to make a motion this time just to, I can't support this report at this time, and if I could get a seconder, I'd like to speak to it more. And I don't know if this is the time to do this, or...
Yes, you can make a motion.
Okay, the motion at this time, I do not support this report as printed, and if I can get a seconder, I'd like to speak to it.
Councillor Warren.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going through this report, and like I said, good report, and I see that staff has recommended option 2, you know, and I got to go to my pages to make sure I get everything right here. So it's pages 18 and 19 about how we're going to do a soft open, and I want to talk about a soft open, and it tells me that, you know, I didn't know what a soft opening was, but there was lots of questions, and he explained it to me. So a soft open is, we will agree that the program will start in full, the operation by bylaw. A soft open allows greater flexibility and presents a friendlier feeling. It will take time to hire, train, so on, externally, and also the ST owners to become educated with the regulations. So with a proactive seek out licensing, some will, some not. Enforce the first year will be done, this is the important part, enforcement for the first year will be done given to due regard to the issue report violations, but will be centered on education and registry. So our first year, we're gonna educate people. Well, we've had 5 years to educate people, but anyway, the second year, we're gonna be more focused on complaint response. Okay, so that's kind of what the soft opening is all about. And we're gonna hire administrator, 2 licensed by law, and a municipal law enforcement. I got one question for Mr. Sloan. You mentioned about demerit points, and I just would like you to explain to me how does that work, and how long before we get so many bad points that we deal with people? If you could answer that for me, please.
Sure, through the mayor to the councillor. That's a great question. So the demerit point system kind of connects with that whole idea of around education. So the demerit point system is a way of providing that direct connection to the property owner based on the issue that's being reported. Schedule C of the bylaw provides some examples of what those issues can be, and the point that would be attached to them. So the idea is the demerit points add up to a certain number, and then we can move into an area where it's becoming less education and more compliance enforcement. So if a license has been issued and they reach the maximum amount of demerit points, then we can revoke the license.
Okay, thank you, but you still didn't answer my question. How many demerit points does it take to get to the next stage? Do you get one demerit point for every time? I need to know how long that process is going to take.
Sure, to the merit of the councillor, I'd have to look up the number just to be 100% sure. I believe it's 15. And the demerit points, just as additional information, the demerit points stay on the record for 2 years, and then they reset to 0 if there's no additional offenses or issues.
Oh, okay, thank you. Doesn't answer me completely, but I know it's a demerit point, but I'd like to know further more about that. Is there a 3-strike rule you're out, or is this just strictly demerit points? I've talked about, I think it's in your proposed amendments, that you said there's a 3-strike rule and out.
Through the merit of the councillor, I don't believe I said there's a 3-strike rule. I believe it was mentioned in council. However, I don't like to use that analogy because it's not a 3-strike rule and you're out like baseball. It is the demerit point system is accumulation of points and opportunities to provide that education back out to the property owner. I wonder how we got here. You know, for the last 4 years, since this started in 2017, I just kind of wonder how we got there. It probably got here because we had so many complaints. And I want people to remember this as I go forward, is that if there wasn't any complaints, we wouldn't be talking about short-term rentals today, because nobody'd be talking about it because there's no complaints. So this got here for the last 4 years is because of complaints. So remember that as I go forward. Another question I have for you, page 22 on the question is, what is an investigation service fee? Through the merit of the councillor, so service fees are fees that we attach to calls to service. So if we respond to a property for a complaint, as an example, based on the complaint and based on whether it's a first attendance, a second attendance, third attendance, there's a fee that's attached to that call to service. So it's essentially a monetary penalty, but it's also a cost recovery fee for that service directly. Essentially, conceptually, I should say, it's a way of taking the cost of doing the work off of the general taxpayer and putting it back on the violator.
Thank you for that. So there's a problem. Our bylaw officer goes out and investigates and charges a fee, and who pays for that?
Through the merit of the councillor, the property owner would pay that, or the violator.
Do we have an amount of money that I didn't see that anywhere? Do we make a lot of money on this?
No.
Okay,
That's a short answer.
That completely answers that question. The cost of doing things. We talked about complaints and so on, so I'm going to get into another little area that is one of my concerns. We talk about in this report that we're going to set something up, that we're going to have somebody show up within 30 minutes of as soon as we phone them, and they're going to be there within 30 minutes. So my question to that is I see the hours that you've put there. It was 8:30 to 6, but it's now you can have people work from 7 to 9. I'd like to know the phone number, and I'd like to know the person who's going to answer that phone from 9:05 until 6:55, because somebody has to answer the phone, because you're going to have somebody call the owner or a friend, and you're going to have there in 30 minutes. So is there a number that people can phone and talk to somebody within those hours? From after 9 p.m. until 7 a.m.?
Yeah, that's a great question. So through the mayor to the councillor, so we're exploring two different options right now. So it depends on the decision of council today where we go with this. But currently in the municipality, we have an after-hours contact number that potentially could be leveraged to provide the round-the-clock sort of complaint intake for this. Through the vendor, Granicus, Granicus also has a 24-hour contact number, and in their program, the people, just as an example, so if they're registered with the municipality for a specific property, we would have the owner's contact information, and Granicus would have that as well. So within their program, they can call the owner directly. They can start the information gathering. They can ask the owner to respond to the issue, and that should happen within 30 to 60 minutes. And then the very next day, all that information is forwarded on to municipal law enforcement, so we can start our end of the investigation and any legal response that we need to take.
Okay, thank you for that. I like that answer. So just to clarify, so if I phone tomorrow or whenever we decide today that there will be a live person at the end of that phone, and everything will start and the clock will start to have somebody within and at this person's place within 30 minutes. Is that correct?
Through the mayor to the councillor, yes. Just to clarify, the vendor, the contact is over phone. The obligation is on the owner to respond to the property to address the issue. I just don't want to be clear that you're not expecting a municipal law enforcement officer there within 30 minutes. That's not going to happen.
No, that was my question, is just that I just want to make sure that when I tell my constituents that there's a phone number, somebody's going to pick up the phone and they're going to start some action to get people to the issues that we have on board. That's my question, and I think you answered it, said that yes, someone will pick up the phone and things will start happening right away. Correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you very much. So, going forward, we're explaining, there was lots of questions sent there, and the staff roles and so on. So we make a lot of bylaws. We have a lot of issues, and I'm reading this thing here. What's the responsibility of a bylaw? We always read the bylaws saying bylaws will take care of this and take care. Me as a counselor, when somebody phones me, I say, yeah, phone the bylaw. We have bylaws for this. We have bylaws for just about everything, by the way. But we have a bylaw, and if you phone bylaw, bylaw will take care of it. But we have already determined that we don't have any bylaws officers that identify. We know where the problems are today, but bylaw officers will not go, and will they not go into a crowded and maybe a noisy and maybe a dangerous situation, and they will call the police. And I noticed the roles that we have here, so we know that they aren't going to go. And even if they do go, they aren't going in, they're going to wait for the police, which is probably a good safety feature for sure. And the police services, that they do collect location-based data, but they do not specifically associate the data with STRs. So I haven't really heard, at our last meeting, we talked about this and we never finished it, and that's why we're trying to do it today, that Councillor Yeo mentioned something about, let's talk to the police, bring them in here, and let's talk about what their role is and what can they do to help us and so on. And I mentioned something about working at night, but that was already answered because contractually we can't work after 9 o'clock. So we haven't really talked to the police. I really don't know what the role is of the police officer, and I think the only people who can answer that is that we get them here to ask that question. So, I think everybody's getting my drift where I'm going, but anyway, I guess, I want to talk about this all day, so I'm going to kind of wrap it up a little bit, is that today we're asked to support option 2, which I don't, for those reasons, and we are asked to spend over $400,000 or $450,000 on data and on items. Already we've talked about, we already know where the problems are, we know the occurrences is, we know everything. We got so much information, we should be able to go running. But out of that $450,000, not $1 is going to be spent on enforcement to help the people that sat here and told us how serious it was. They can't sleep, they're bawling and crying, they can't live in their house. Not $1 I see in this report out of $450,000 is going to be spent on that. It's our job as councillors to speak for the people and how we're going to help them. And this is a hot subject, and I know there's a lot of concerns. And before I make any recommendations and like that, that's my speech on this, and I'm sure there's other people that want to speak. If not, I will make recommendations. Thank you.
Did you want to make a motion?
I'd like to hear if anybody else has any other issues and that, because it might change of what I add and delete or whatever from my motion.
Okay, well, I think for this morning, we receive only, and then any of the motions, when it comes to council this afternoon, will be made. So if you give me a motion to receive.
I will give you a motion to receive.
And I think Council Warren already seconded it, so.
Okay. Any more discussion?
Yeah, well, I think, Councillor Joyce, as said, well, you want to speak as seconder to the receive? Go ahead.
I have a feeling that this is rushed. There are many facets to this bylaw that we're going to decide. There are things I like, there are things I don't like, and I think that will take a lot of time to debate. That's just my feeling with this, and I'll second that for receive. Thank you.
Councillor Joyce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. And thank you, Councillor McDonald, for raising a lot of issues there. I think what we need to do is take a step back and look at the bigger picture here. We started this in 2017. It's 2023 now. We do have to respond to our constituents' concerns, so we do have to act. And to delay further, I think, would be a mistake. Mr. Sloan has offered 4 different options. I think option 2 is the correct way to go. The current bylaw procedures don't work. That's been proven. The Municipal Act doesn't allow us to raise fines to a certain point, so the only option, in my mind, is to go to a licensing strategy, which gives us, the power to make these changes and make things safe for other people. So I think what we really have to do is move to option 2, but with revisions. I think it's 90% there. I agree with Councillor McDonald and Councillor Warren that there's some changes that do have to be made. The devil is in the details. That's basically, I think that's what we should do is adopt option 2, and then perhaps have a committee meeting to hammer out some of the finer details. One of the big questions I have for Officer Sloan is the action plan. To Councillor McDonald's point, will we have new bylaw officers hired that will be working from 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. Friday and Saturday nights? That's when the problems are occurring. It doesn't make any sense to create a new licensing program if we can't fully enforce it. I do have comments on some detailed changes I'd like to see in option 2, but I think that can wait for a later time. Thank you. Oh yeah, it's just one more thing. If history shows, the Romans invented taxation, and 2,000 years of history shows that whenever a business gets big, problems can occur. You get bad actors, and government must intervene. There's countless examples of that. More recently, ATVs, ride sharing, door-to-door sales. These are all more recent examples where bad actors have forced government to intervene to regulate and control. And STRs are now $1 billion business in Ontario. It has that mix of high business. Show me a business that doesn't have forms to fill out, safety measures in place, and a small levy to operate. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Perry.
Thanks very much, Mayor. And, looking at where we are since 2 weeks ago from Committee of the Whole when we adjourned, I think we have a lot of concerns as councillors. As Councillor McDonald said, bringing the people to bear with this bylaw moving forward. We have the same report before us as we did 2 weeks ago, despite comments from council. Things need to be considered. We talked about tailoring this bylaw to address the actual harm as specifically as possible, with a lesser than 30-day period to be able to get at those 1-week rentals, those weekend rentals that seem to be the nub of the problem, the bad actors, as Councillor Joyce was saying. A number of exceptions were raised last Committee of the Whole, especially by myself and Councillor Yeo. Number of occupants was addressed in terms of how that would work out. There's been discussion since last week about proportionate fees and how we apportion the fee structure. Fines have also come up. A 3 strikes you're out policy has come up. And these are big substantive issues that we need to get right. Councillor McDonald mentioned that as well. My question would be either to you, Mayor, or to the clerk, if we don't receive the report, do we go back to the drawing board? Where is council's opportunity to bring these considerations and amendments to the current bylaw being tabled? Where is our opportunity to act in that way as council?
You would be able to do that this afternoon when you have council meeting and it's already been extracted for discussion at council, and that's an opportunity to make your changes.
Right, I hesitate with something that's important to kind of legislate and bylaw off the top of our heads at a meeting this very day, this afternoon, but I'll look forward to hearing what my council colleagues have in mind in terms of moving this forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I could maybe just through the mayor. So you want to receive the report regardless. It's simply receiving information. There's no action that's taken as a result of this, and that's why the debate or the discussion can continue on as is. If committee this morning wanted to also provide other recommendations as follow-up to this conversation, you can do so. And then those recommendations go back to you, but sitting as council to make some decisions this afternoon and ongoing. Again, it's a bit of a chicken and the egg sort of here where there's been a lot of great inputs. I think what staff would request is some sort of general direction, at least on the path that council would like to take. If it's reasonable to have a licensing program and regime, then we can do the detailed work, bring it back to you in sort of follow-up venues to make that happen. If you want to stay on the same course, which is nuisance bylaws and enforcement and how that might look and cost and so on, then we can do, obviously collect additional information on that stream as well. So I would suggest that it would be important to get some general direction from committee and council today so that we can better inform you or provide you with the information for some of the details that you're talking about. You would not be suggesting, or there's no recommendations here that the bylaw as written needs to come forward. So you can go through those recommendations. If you're not comfortable having a bylaw come forward to you this afternoon, then don't direct that. You can simply sort of receive and provide some general direction on how you want to manage and deal with STRs. So hopefully that helps a bit.
Thank you. Councillor Warren, do you have some?
Yeah, I just, going forward this afternoon, because it's so quick to from here to there, during that meeting, a motion can be made to have maybe less formal meeting to sit around and everybody bring their ideas together and hash out what everybody wants, and then take it forward to another committee of the whole, I guess, next month. I'm not sure, but I guess time is of the essence also. We're getting into that season, so it makes it kind of a rushed deal today.
Thank you. Councillor Smeaton.
I'll be the silver lining through you, Mr. Mayor. As much as I agree with everything here, I do think it's encouraging that an excellent document was brought forward with a lot of work. To me, an incredible amount of research from Councillor McDonald. No stone left unturned was presented. Very, very thorough on all ends, and people are seeing the democratic process at work. A lot of people have a lot of questions, and evidence that this needs to be discussed further is these came back from Director Sloan. He recognized at the last meeting that there were questions that needed to be answered. Everybody here is acknowledging the same sentiment, I think, just in a different way, that there is need for further ironing out in a way. And the difficulty, of course, is time, that we are in the season of short-term rentals. So, you know, to me, this is the whole what we signed up for. Like, this is the point of council. You're seeing council working. You're seeing somebody present. You're seeing a councillor present questioning that I happen to, because he and I've talked so much, support 100% of his sentiments. We think the same on this particular issue, and we have people around the table willing to express counter things and things we need to work out. So I just have one question new to in council as far as in response to the CAO, because it's a question I have. Obviously, the season is what I just said, but how does tabling work? If we were to table this to next council, could we not and I'm not suggesting this, I want to know the answer though, like for me. If we tabled this to the next committee of the whole, which would be the soonest meeting we have, can you not strike a committee, and we'll call it emergent, I don't know the right words, where the convening, such as Councillor Warren suggesting, where we sit and hash these things out, and then, or is that, I guess my question is, how does tabling work in this scenario? And if I'm off, that's fine.
Kathy?
Go ahead, you started there.
So council has the ability to do a motion to defer. The motion to defer has to have a certain date and time. It can be a council meeting. It could be a committee of the whole meeting where you have all of council sitting down, but we would call a special COW meeting. So you have the ability to defer rather than table.
If I could then, through the mayor, just for further clarification, what you can't do is have a informal ad hoc type committee or discussion. It would have to be deferred to a defined public meeting like this. You would sit as committee. Your other option would be to receive today and strike a committee. There's obviously a process to that, and you have to do it publicly, scope out what that sort of review or work would be. And then that committee could be established and bring back recommendations to you later on in the year. So those are really your two streams right now. But committee of the whole, whether it's scheduled or a special one, is really that venue for you to have a more sort of open discussion on the various items of the agenda and the details.
As we're doing now. So, okay, thank you. My only last question, Mr. Mayor, really quickly, was it was discussed about the OPP possibly be invited to the next CPAC meeting. Councillor Yeo and I were talking about that with Councillor Warren. Is that still, did that happen, or is it something that could happen? Next Monday, okay. And was that happening? Oh, good. Okay, so there's one thing that was, people were wondering about. That's good. That's a conversation that's taking place, but not till next week. Okay, perfect.
Councillor Ashmore.
Thank you. From what we've seen in the last, quite a few months, there's been a tremendous amount of work that's been going on here, a really good report, a lot of public input from both sides. And just when I look, I kind of narrow it down to 2 pages here, 111 and 112. When we have this short-term rentals on our webs page, and this is where this has all started. What is a short-term rental? The bylaw inspection fees. What do I need to know if I'm renting a short-term rental? Maybe people don't read this. Maybe this is probably part of the problem. We've never had really good communication to the public. Fire pits and open air burns, waste and recycling, parking, noise, pets. You could probably put humans besides that. They probably have more noise than pets. Fireworks and property standards. So those were the main issues that were always on the table, and enforcement was always an issue as well. And rental occupancy, the bylaws, would they be based on lawfully constructed bedrooms? And then we're talking about powers of entry. We're going to be getting into that. Like, that's a legal issue too, your powers of entry for bylaw officers. And there's so many things here that have to be done, and it has to be done right. I know it has to be done quickly, but it has to be done right. But I think for the time being, you know, for the next, well, looks like it's going to be deferred for shortly here, but we need to really step up the enforcement. I mean, in the meantime, there's no excuse that we can't step up enforcement in the meantime. So that's what I think we should do right now. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. So I think that for what I've heard from around the table, I'd like to make a motion to defer this to a special meeting. And in the meantime, we can send our questions, our concerns, and have some answers before we meet, which might save some time. But my motion also includes, and I can help with that right now.
Well, I think your motion needs to be made this afternoon. Right now.
Oh, this afternoon? Okay, sorry. Okay.
Right now, we're doing a motion to receive only, and it will go to this afternoon's meeting. And then if you want to make a motion to defer at that time, we can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
Yep.
So we have a motion to receive on the floor. At the same time, can we receive the question and answer document that Manager Sloan provided this morning that was in your yellow folders? So just Councillor McDonald and Councillor Warren, are you fine receiving that at the same time? Thank you. All in favor? And that's passed. Moving on, our next item is a presentation by the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation. And I believe they're on the line. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Good morning.
We can hear you.
Perfect.
Good. So I'll allow you, please introduce yourself and go ahead with the presentation.
Perfect. Is the presentation up for you to see?
Yes, it
Awesome.
is.
Thank you. So good morning, Mayor and Council. My name is Sarah Groves, and I'm an account manager in the Municipal and Stakeholder Relations Department at MPAC. I support the municipal stakeholders within the cities of Kawartha Lakes and Peterborough and the counties of Peterborough and Haliburton. I'd first like to take a moment to congratulate you all on your recent election. I look forward to working with you and the municipal staff in 2023 and beyond. Whether you're newly elected or a seasoned elected official, please know that we are here to help and can support you with any questions as they arise. To start, municipal relationships are a priority at MPAC, and because of that, we continue to focus on elevating the municipal and property owner experience. Today, I'll be sharing with you who MPAC is, what our role is, and how we play a part in property assessment and taxation. Next slide, please. At MPAC, we are Ontario's property experts, and our job is to assess and classify more than 5.5 million properties across Ontario, worth a combined value of more than $3 trillion. In the past year, Ontario has grown by approximately 45,000 new residential homes. And in 2022, we added more than $37 billion to Ontario's assessment rolls. Every municipality uses our assessments to make informed decisions about their community, including the distribution of property taxes. Ontario's property tax system and these assessments generate approximately $30 billion in tax revenue annually. Next slide, please. The Ontario Property Assessment and Taxation System is made up of 4 players, and all have a different role and interest in the process. The provincial government is responsible for setting assessment and taxation legislation and policies. They also determine the education property tax rate. Additionally, there's an independent body that adjudicates appeals of MPAC's assessed values, commonly referred to as the ARB, or the Assessment Review Board. The Assessment Review Board also falls under the jurisdiction of the province. MPAC is an independent, not-for-profit corporation funded by all Ontario municipalities, and our role is to accurately assess and classify all properties within Ontario. We do this in compliance with the Assessment Act and regulations set by the Government of Ontario. We are accountable through a board of directors that is appointed by the Minister of Finance. Municipalities determine budget requirements, set tax rates, and collect property taxes to pay for municipal services such as police, fire, roads, recreation, among many others. Municipalities use MPAC's assessments and the established tax rates to distribute their tax requirement to ratepayers. And finally, the property owners, who pay the property tax bill and help set market value through ongoing property purchases and sales. Next slide, please. As you can imagine, maintaining Ontario's property database is very important. Property data is continuously updated so that municipal records are accurate when our municipal stakeholders are making important tax decisions. Maintaining Ontario's property database includes inspecting and assessing new construction, additions, and renovations promptly, responding to property owner inquiries, and working to help them understand their property assessments, and supporting municipalities by offering Municipal Connect, where municipal stakeholders can obtain assessment-related information, and through ongoing conversations and engagements, and things like working collaboratively on projects that are important to our municipal stakeholders, like digital building permitting. We also have important statutory duties such as handling requests for reconsideration and maintaining people data by tracking school support for over 5.5 million properties. Next slide, please. Monitoring the market and assessing newly built and renovated properties are things that we do every day to keep our property data current. We also periodically update every single property assessment in Ontario based on the same legislated valuation date, and we call this an assessment update or reassessment. The valuation date for the most recent assessment update is January 1st, 2016, and this is when we determined what every single property in Ontario could have reasonably sold for in its current state and condition at a particular point in time. Regular revaluation of properties ensures that assessments stay up to date and similar properties of similar value in the same municipality pay similar property taxes. Provincial legislation determines when MPAC can conduct a province-wide assessment update and sets the valuation date for each update cycle. Next slide, please. So the reassessment that was scheduled to occur in 2020 was postponed by the province to provide stability and certainty to Ontarians and to enable municipalities to focus on responding to the challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. As a result, property assessments continue to be based on a legislated valuation date of January 1st, 2016. MPAC is continually maintaining and updating the assessment roll to reflect changes to properties. For any new buildings or structures, MPAC determines a value as of January 1st, 2016 to ensure equity when comparing to existing properties. Next slide, please. Ontario's property tax system is based on everyone paying their portion of what it costs to deliver community services. And to do this, properties are assigned a value at a common valuation date. This is a principle called current value assessment, and is the price a property might reasonably be expected to sell for if sold by a willing seller to a willing buyer after appropriate time and exposure on an open market. Next slide, please. So just to reiterate, while we await the next province-wide assessment update, January 1st, 2016 continues to be Ontario's legislated valuation date. This is a fixed date to which all properties are valued. Although the assessment update remains paused, our work continues to keep property data up to date, and property owners will still receive an updated property assessment notice from MPAC if there are changes made to their properties. Once the province announces when the next assessment update will take place and what that valuation date will be, we will let you know, and we can then have those meaningful conversations as we work to finalize the assessed values within your community. Next slide, please. So in Ontario, there are 3 industry-wide standardized approaches to valuing properties. The first is the direct comparison approach, and this is when recent sales of comparable properties are analyzed. This is typically used on residential properties, condos, and vacant land. And although our analysis tool considers over 200 factors, 5 factors make up approximately 85% of a typical home's value. And those 5 main factors include the location, the lot dimensions, exterior square footage, the quality of construction of the home, and the age of the property, which gets adjusted for any major renovations or additions that may have occurred. The income approach is used for industrial malls, large medical buildings, office buildings, shopping centers, or large sports stadiums. And when the ability to earn revenue is tied to the real estate and not the business that may be run from that location. So to value these properties, we need to determine how much revenue it could generate, as well as the sale price. So to clarify, it's not the revenue being generated by the occupant, but rather the revenue that the occupant is paying to the landlord that we use to value the properties on the income approach. This method requires a detailed analysis of the income and expenses to determine how much income a property could be expected to generate if sold on the open market. And those 2 factors create a capitalization rate that helps us determine the property's assessed value. And lastly, the cost approach. And this is typically used for general purpose industrial properties, retail, and warehousing, to name a few. This approach is used when a property type is unique and rarely sold on the open market. Therefore, there's a limited source of data. We calculate the cost of replacing any buildings or accessible fixtures, and then apply a deduction for depreciation due to age, as well as any adjustments if there are conditions impacting the value of the property. And finally, we determine the value of the land and add it to produce an overall valuation. Next slide, please. So what draws our attention to a property? And it's typically one of the following things: a market sale, a request from a municipality or a property owner, a request for reconsideration or appeal, or building permit activity. MPAC's role is to take building permits and plans and turn them into assessment. Our municipal stakeholders rely on MPAC assessments to levy property tax. And when MPAC delivers that assessment, our municipal stakeholders can then realize that new revenue. Every year, MPAC processes on average 300,000 building permits for new developments and renovations. And we're the only organization with a data set of all building permits in Ontario. So our understanding of this data gives us a unique perspective on ways to modernize its collection and exchange to support our municipal partners. Some insights based on data we have captured. In 2021, Ontario saw more than 48,000 new residential homes constructed, with just under 50% of those being detached homes. And condos are actually getting smaller and detached homes are getting larger. So Ontario condominiums are 35% smaller on average than they were 25 years ago, while the average detached home is 25% larger. So in the 1990s, the average condominium in Ontario peaked at approximately 1,100 square feet, and today we're seeing them at around 700 square feet. And in comparison, the single-family detached homes in the mid-1990s were approximately 2,000 square feet, and today the typical single-family detached home is 2,500 square feet. So next slide, please. After we assess a property or change an assessment, we mail the property owner a property assessment notice. And sometimes property owners don't agree with the assessed value. They might then connect with you to let them know their disagreement with the values. But it's important to remember that property assessments are not taxation. If you get an inquiry, you can help us by asking the property owner a few questions. The first one we always ask is, could you have sold your property on January 1st, 2016 for the assessed value? Second, I always direct them to About My Property, or amp.ca. And this is to review the information that MPAC has on file regarding their property to ensure it's correct. They can also use AMP or About My Property to conduct comparable research on assessment values in their area. Once they've taken a look at the comparable values and the information that we have on their property, if they're still in disagreement with their assessment, they can file a request for reconsideration directly on About My Property at free of charge. And the fastest way to review is by filing directly on that link. Next slide, please. So let's spend a moment to address the relationship between property taxes and assessment. Assessments distribute taxes. They do not determine the taxes paid. When a province-wide assessment update occurs, the most important factor is not how much the assessed value of a property has changed, but rather how the assessed value has changed relative to the average change in the class in that community. Next slide, please. So in anticipation of the next province-wide reassessment, we have implemented a strategy to address misconceptions about the relationships between assessed values and taxation, including resources from municipalities that will ensure when an announcement is made, we are ready with the support that you need. This digital toolkit, available on mpac.ca, can help municipalities, including elected officials, mitigate misinformation and provide support and resources to educate and inform property owners. In this digital toolkit, you can find a new video, how your property taxes are calculated based on the assessed value of your home. And could we please watch that now?
Property taxes are based on your home's value. What you might not know is that an increase in your home's value doesn't necessarily mean your taxes will go up. To explain, let's take a look at how your property taxes are calculated. Imagine there's a town that only has 3 homes, and they're each worth a different amount. The total cost to provide all of the town's services is $1,200. This is collected through property taxes. Each homeowner pays property taxes based on their home's assessed value. So we take the total cost of services and divide it by the total property value. This tax rate is applied to all the houses to get enough money to pay for the town's services. Each homeowner pays according to the assessed value of their home, and every 4 years, the houses are reassessed. Let's say all 3 properties have gone up equally in value. The total cost of services hasn't changed, but the total property value has increased. When this happens, there will be a decrease in the tax rate. Now, when we apply that new rate on all the homes, everyone still pays the same. Now, let's say another 4 years has gone by, and these homes are reassessed. During this time, the house on the right gains more market value than the other 2. The total value of all the homes have increased, which means the town has to calculate a new tax rate. With this new tax rate, the first 2 homes will actually pay less than the home on the right that was reassessed at a higher value. Since the cost of services hasn't changed, the town doesn't need to collect more property taxes on the whole. However, since property taxes are based on a home's value, taxes for each individual home could potentially go up or down based on the rest of the homes. So, what happens when the cost to provide services goes up? Well, it means more property taxes need to be collected from every home, and a new tax rate is calculated. To get the new rate, we take that amount that the town now needs and divide it by all of the property values. The new rate is applied to all the homes, and now everyone has to pay the new tax amount to continue to fund the town's services. So, let's review. 1. Property taxes are based on the assessed value of a home. If all assessments go up equally, everyone pays the same. 2. If all assessments do not go up equally, there's a redistribution of the tax. 3. If the town's cost to provide services increases, the municipality may choose to increase the tax rate. When this happens, everyone pays their share of that increase. And that explains the relationship between property value and property taxes.
Perfect, thank you. So as I wrap up, I want to thank you for having me here today, and I want to stay connected. Just on the last slide, please. Thank you. If not already, I'm Sorry, my dog might bark here momentarily. If not already, make sure you subscribe to In Touch, our monthly municipal e-newsletter, which can be done through mpact.ca. We also have a library of digital resources available. So be sure to reach out to me, last slide please, if you have any questions or are looking for resources. Lastly, here's my contact information as well as the contact information for my regional manager, Lynn Cunningham. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Would you be available to answer a couple of questions?
I sure can.
Oh, thank you. Councillor Richardson, Deputy Mayor Richardson.
Thank you, and through you. Thanks, Ms. Groves, for the presentation. It's always a hot topic out there when you're talking to local residents. And I know you've been out doing your work, because last month I've been getting a lot of questions. One is based on these new assessments, the new validation date. Like, I did call MPAC myself, and they were saying that it would probably come in effect next January 2024. I don't know if that is the actual date that you guys are looking at right now.
Thank you, through you. At this time, we do not have a new valuation date as to which our values would be updated. So for now, values are still based on the January 1st, 2016 valuation date.
Okay, great, thank you. And just one more quick question. So if the homeowner was to appeal the assessment, do they appeal to you or do they appeal to the municipality?
Yes, thank you, through you. There's a couple different ways. So if the property is a residential or farm property, property owners first file a request for reconsideration with MPAC. Commercial or industrial properties have the option to go directly to the assessment review board and skip the RFR process, but they are made either directly to MPAC or the ARB, or assessment review board.
Thank you very much. Those are just the two questions that keep coming up. Thank you.
Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your presentation. I have a question there. Impact puts a price on your house, and we all know how houses have gone crazy, and the need for housing, and people are coming into our town, and if you're selling, it's great. But if you're staying in your house and the house beside you sells for $400,000 more than what you think your house is worth, how do you determine on the sale value of a house and then look at the neighborhood and come up with your impact? Because impact and appraisers are a lot different in price.
Yes, thank you for that question. Through you, Mayor. There's a few different things that we look at. So all properties are valued on that same valuation date of January 1st, 2016. So if your neighbor sold their property last week, we know that the market values right now are higher than what the assessed values are. But right now we're still using that valuation date of January 1st, 2016. Whenever the province decides to announce a new valuation date, that sale information that would have occurred maybe last week on that property, kind of showing that increase in market value, will be taken into consideration for the next assessment update. There's all sorts of different characteristics that we look at as far as determining the value. And like you mentioned, it is neighborhoods, streets, properties of similar square footage, similar design, similar fixtures, finishings, etc. Those all come into the consideration when we determine a value.
Thank you. Councillor Joyce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. A couple questions. Great presentation. Kawartha Lakes, we have two main classes of communities, residential, those on lakefront and those not on lakefront. Can you give me a sense of valuation increases of a regular residential home versus those being on the waterfront? I got a feeling those with waterfront are increasing higher more rapidly than without waterfront. And I have another question.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. So at this point, because we don't have a valuation date, we don't actually know what the impact of those increases are between your residential not on water or your residential properties that are on water. When that date is announced, we can firm up those values based on what we've seen in the market and the characteristics. And again, we take into consideration all types of different things. So each lake or each body of water may be impacted a little differently depending on what the market has dictated.
Okay, thank you. And if the pandemic didn't happen, when would after 2016, the next valuation have occurred typically? What's the 2020? Is every 4 years?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor. Yes, the last update would have been scheduled for January 1st of 2020.
Last question is, just out of curiosity, of the 5.5 million properties, how many of those would have been residential for Ontario?
I can't be sure, but our property base is mainly residential properties, so I would say likely 90%. That's just a rough guess. I could get an actual number for you across the province, but I'm thinking approximately 90% or more is residential.
All right, thank you very much.
Councillor Ashmore.
Thank you. Through you to Sarah. Thanks for the presentation. Just two quick questions. You mentioned institutional facilities or institutional buildings. How are they assessed again, and whether they're private or publicly owned? How are they assessed? Because they're very big entities, and just wondering how that works.
It may depend, through you. It may depend on the type of structure and what the use is for, whether it falls under the direct comparison, which would be more for your residential properties, or the cost or income approach. So it would depend on very specific sites, site details, and what the use of the property is. If you have specific properties that you're interested in knowing about, we can certainly take that offline and we can look into those.
That's fine, thanks. And the last question was, MPAC had many offices in Ontario, and during the pandemic they were closed, but a lot of them still haven't reopened. And one example is in Peterborough, where I went not too long ago and the door was locked and they said go online and book an appointment. I'm just wondering, I know most people use online, but a lot of people would like to go into the office and get their assessment if they need it or whatever. But do you foresee any of these offices, these satellite offices, opening up again so the public can go back in and get information, please?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor. So at this time, our MPAC offices are closed to the public, but are available by appointment, and you can always contact our customer contact center at the toll-free number. Now, in addition to that, we do have the ability to come out and meet property owners directly at their property. And at any time, they can contact somebody at our local office, and we can absolutely set something up that works with them. So even though our physical office isn't open, we're more than willing to accommodate a meeting at such time that they would like.
Okay, so one goes to the website and books an appointment to the mpac.ca, or is that where they go to, or are they to get the phone number to book for their local office to come in?
Thank you. Through you. So they can they can reach out to myself, and I can certainly set something up with our local valuation staff. We also have valuation staff that can come into the City of Kawartha Lakes office and meet as well. That's an opportunity, but they can certainly reach out to our 1-800 number, and the customer contact staff will set them, get them in touch with a local staff member to meet with them.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Warren.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you for the presentation. It was really interesting. I was wondering, I really liked your little video. Is that possible to get that off of your website so you can share that with people in our wards? Because it really does explain it really well. Because, I mean, obviously from 2016 to 2023, there's a big change.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor. So that video is available for you to use on your own social media. The municipal staff do have access to a toolkit that has the direct links within there. It's available on our YouTube site, as well as directly linked within our mpac.ca website. So there's all sorts of other videos that may be of great use for you as well. But I think we're really going to become reliant on that video as we as we start seeing more questions about the next assessment update and what that may mean for property owners, because it does, like you mentioned, it really does lay it out and explain it very well.
Thank you. I have one question for you, and it is by way of getting the information out there. The Municipal Property Assessment Corporation is not part of any municipality. Is that correct?
That is correct. We are funded by all 444 municipalities across the province.
But you would be more of a provincial entity than you would a municipal entity. Is that fair to say?
I think that's fair to say. We need to be mindful that we not only represent our municipalities, we represent our property owners, and we also represent the province as well.
Thank you. It's just that I have heard in the past from residents, about how we are assessing them incorrectly, and I try and point out that we don't do the assessments. So thank you for clarifying that. And thank you for your presentation today. And could I get a motion to receive that presentation? Deputy Mayor Richardson, Councillor Yeo. All in favor? Thank you. And thank you for being with us today. And sorry you were delayed. Sorry you were delayed a couple of weeks.
That's okay. Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Bye. Moving on in our agenda, we have item 9.8, which is a report on the 2023 tax policy decisions. So this is a motion to receive, and we can, if there's any questions, we have Ms. Liotti on the line. Welcome. If there are any questions on this report. Seeing none, can I have a motion to receive the report and refer it to council meeting this afternoon?
Are you going to make the recommendations that are...
That goes with the recommendations that are there, and it goes to council this afternoon. Okay? Councillor Smeaton and Councillor Ashmore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a question to Director Buchboom, but I was just waiting on their feedback on comparing the rates from 1 or 2 years before and what the percentage was going ahead. I know there was a freeze on, for example, the farm mill rate or the farm rate. I just wanted to, maybe it could be answered now. That's fine. Save it doing it this afternoon if there was any update on the questions that I had sent.
I believe there's no change, but I'll let Ms. Liotti answer that.
That's for you. Good morning, everyone. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. So I did respond, Councillor Ashmore. There is no change in terms of the tax ratio for the farm property, so that's continuing to stay at 0.25. Obviously, the tax rates for 2023, I'm in the process of calculating those, so we don't have a definitive rate. However, Council did pass a 3% operational budget increase, so you may see the actual tax rate increase accordingly.
Thanks. It was on my phone, but wasn't looking at my phone, so. But I'll look at it. Thanks
No
for
worries.
getting back.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So we have a motion to refer the recommendations to council this afternoon. We have a mover and seconder. All in favor? And that passes. Thank you. Thank you for being here. The next item on the agenda is item 9.9, which is high water bill relief. I need a motion as printed to go to council this afternoon. Councillor Joyce?
Actually, I wish to make a motion not as printed, but to recommend a relief of $3,500 instead of $1,500. And I can explain why after I get a seconder.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Ashmore. Go ahead.
Yeah, I asked previously on this situation, I asked if there was precedent on this, and Councilor Ashmore was able to, he'd been on this committee previously, found an example for a commercial establishment that had a somewhat similar problem, and council voted, the previous council, not this one, this, I forget the year actually, but we met them halfway and at 50%. They've been charged in this high period of high consumption a little over $12,000. Of that, they would have paid easily $1,000, $1,500 in normal consumption. So it's about $10,000 in water that was leaked. 50% would be $5,000, but I'm not suggesting that. My analysis is there's 9 months here of a leaky toilet, and I feel that the owners could have acted sooner or faster to get on top of this. So I just looked at the first 6 months of high water, which is about $7,000. So 50% of that is the $3,500. That's how I got to the $3,500 mark in terms of a recommendation of relief. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Ashmore, do you want to speak to it?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that motion there. Councillor Joyce, and the year was 2019 when we did this, and this is, I think, a little bit more helpful for the business owners. We did help a long-established restaurant chain on Kent Street West, and they were really in need of help, and it worked out good for both parties. So, you know, hopefully this doesn't happen very often, or won't happen again for the city. But you know, we need to help people when especially businesses, when they need help. So they asked for help, and we came to a compromise. So I think this is a good compromise. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question, if I could, for Manager Gigliotti. I'm just curious how the data or the formula that backs up this policy is calculated to arrive at the $1,500. Thank you.
Mr. Gigliotti.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, am I coming through? Through you, Mr. Mayor. So thank you for the question. In terms of the $1,500 maximum relief, that was a change that was instituted when the high water bill policy was reviewed in September of 2019. And so the policy was quite substantially changed from pre-2019 of September to current state. Particularly, the original policy did not extend relief to commercial or industrial properties. It was strictly focused on residential accounts. And so upon that review, we had received some relief requests from our commercial and industrial tenancies, and we felt that there was some justification in terms of reviewing those. And so that was the impetus to setting a maximum amount of $1,500. Speaking to what's currently being tabled in terms of the property at 205 St. George. So the precedence that was just discussed, that was actually a decision that was made pre the changes to the policy in September of 2019. So that relief was actually rendered as part of a motion to council. So it was already sitting outside of the current policy. And that was a deputation that was made to council. Council reviewed it and made that decision. So a little bit of a different comparison in terms of what the current state of the high water bill policy is as it stands today.
If I could just follow up, Mayor, with a second question. Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks very much for that. I see how the maximum has been established. I'm just wondering, is there a formula or a calculation made to determine who gets the maximum and when? Or is it just more, this is a really big bill and we should give them the maximum? Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the follow-up question. So yes, there is. So in essence, what we do is when we look at anyone requesting relief, we would look at normalized usage of this account. And the policy calls for 50% a maximum 50% of the normalized usage. So hypothetically speaking, if we have an account that's their normalized usage is sitting at 1,000 cubic feet of consumption, and their high water bill is 4,000 cubic feet or cubic meters of consumption. So that's a difference of 3,000. We would take 50% of that, and that's what would be put forward. When we actually calculate that in terms of dollars or billing, so whether it's, obviously consumption and then the fixed rates, that's the part where we set at a maximum of 1,500. So again, it's 50% of the normalized consumption that goes forward. And then we actually calculate what that is for billing purposes. If that amount is over 1,500, then it defaults to that maximum amount. And that's irrespective right now, whether it's a commercial, industrial, or residential account.
That's very helpful. Thank you so much.
Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Question for you. I'm looking at there. This is 9 months has gone by, and did they contact the water people to say we have a problem, and did you help them out to say, you would see the bill going up very largely, and they probably told you the bill was really large, and then 9 months later we finally have to listen to a deputation. I'm just kind of wondering what happened. Like, did anybody help them to fix the problem?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the property owners did contact the utility billing division in June of 2020. They had received a high consumption letter. So we had alerted the property owner that there was some anomaly in terms of what we saw in consumption. At that point, staff conversed with the property owner, advising that this was a tenanted account, and obviously there's not a specific landlord that's on site. He indicated at the time that he thought it was through a leaking toilet that had been occurring since the fall of 2019. So that sort of sets the time frame in terms of his contact to us and the existing problem. We reviewed it. It came to me for my review, and we had provided him the option of doing a deputation to council, and that was during COVID. So I know he reached out to the clerk's office, and then we were sort of in a position where he didn't engage or didn't want to move forward with a deputation at that time, and then has since circled back for relief. And when he circled back to our division, I reviewed it again and said, okay, we'll provide you the maximum relief of 1,500. And he wanted to move forward with another deputation to council, and that's why it's before us today.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Smeaton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, just quickly, when I was reading through this and making notes, I thought that it's a policy that's in place, and therefore increasing the number is not an option unless we change the policy. Is that not correct?
Council can change policy. Council can.
Currently, that's not a separate memorandum to change the policy? Okay, so you can on the fly change a policy? I didn't realize that. Thank you.
Council can, if council agrees, they can make changes to policy.
Today. Thanks.
Councillor McDonald, did you have something else?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. So my question is that do we have to change the policy today to get the extra money, or we can just make a decision on that? That's what I want to clarify.
You can make an exception. So, seeing nothing more, we have a motion on the table with the seconder. Did you want to sum up?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this is just an exception. Any other occurrences of high water bills, council would look at that in a particular case as another exception to the policy. Otherwise, the current policy stands. I do recognize this is $2,000 that goes on to the taxpayers, but this is an individual business during COVID. You take that $2,000 divided by 5,000, well, how many taxpayers do we have? Not 75,000, 75,000.
It's just the
60,000
it's just the
people.
water users. It's
Water
not
users,
It's not all
we're
the
talking,
taxpayers.
we're talking pennies. So that's my sum. Thank you.
Okay, so the motion is as printed, but we're changing the amount on the high water bill adjustment from 1,500 to 3,500, just so we're clear. All in favor? And that's passed. Moving on, our next report is amendments to the heritage application policy. Can I have a mover and seconder as printed? Councillor Yeo, Councillor Ashmore. Do you want to speak to it? You're good? Okay. All in favor? And that's passed. Our next item is the Cultural Center feasibility study, item 913. I have a mover and seconder for the report. Councillor Smeaton, seconder. Councillor Warren, Councillor Smeaton, you wish to speak to it?
Just real quick, through you, Mr. Mayor, as to our conversation yesterday, I have a question, I guess, for Director Hawley. And sorry about that, now I know it's for Director Hawley. The next steps toward the funding applications, are they contingent? They're not contingent on already having identified a property, correct?
Through the mayor to the councillor, I'll let Ms. Goodwin speak to that. She's sort of the expert on it, and she can give a
Sorry,
better
Manager
answer.
Goodwin. I
Thanks.
didn't even, yeah, thank you. It was a question asked in a meeting yesterday from a constituent, just to clarify. To us, it seemed very clear that that is the case, but it is true for sure. It's not contingent on already having a building identified, correct?
Correct. Through you, Mayor, it is not contingent. Site selection is part of phase 2, and it will happen with the existing 100,000. This is actually to augment and make a deeper investigation into sort of capital infrastructure.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Ms. Goodwin? Councillor Yeo.
Dan, through you, just a general question. Part of the motion is seems to be asking for permission to apply for grant funding. Is that typical, or is it because it could have budget implications further down? We don't ask every time we want to get a grant.
Not normally, but maybe we'll let Ms. Goodwin speak to it.
Yes, through you, Mayor. I think it was because this is a collaboration between corporate assets and ourselves, and we sort of run two different types of grant programming, if you will. Normally for economic development, we would do investigation, application, and then we would come to council if we had gotten something for signing for, based on the amount of money. I think corporate assets does, where they actually come forward because the information found in phase 2 will actually inform the detailed construction design and actual construction. So it's a bit of an amalgam, if you will, because our departments are working so closely together. So we just thought we would include it all at this time, and then as Manager Found has explained, then if it does become $200,000 budget, then that's sort of marked in the books, and then going forward, we understand that was our platform.
GAO, I think you want to add something?
Sure, if I could, and through you, Mr. Mayor, and that is the explanation, sort of to track the amount of work. It's also to get the council's blessing on the revised scope. So by pursuing those grants, we're matching our funds, and we're really expanding on that next phase and study based on those funds that we secure. So it's to really let council know that and make sure we get your blessing to do that.
Councillor Yeo,
Thank you.
So we have a mover and seconder. Deputy Mayor Richardson.
That's okay. It was just a quick question. I just want to confirm, so that would be $100,000 that we're looking for the federal, just to make sure I have it clear in my mind.
Yeah, so it's based on two funds. There's the Cultural Spaces Fund, and then there's also the Green Municipal Fund. They're both federal. And in speaking with staff who are sort of shepherding these programs, it would be a match up to $100,000. I'm not really sure if it's all through the Green Fund, or whether it's cultural spaces as well. Part feasibility, part exploration. So it's up to the $100,000.
Thank you. Councillor Smeaton.
Just very briefly through you, Mr. Mayor, I want to thank Manager Goodwin, and I'm going to extend it to Manager Liotti and Director Boogaboom too. I didn't earlier for speed, but this is a good entry point to just say that for new council, on the taxation one, I probably drove Sarah absolutely crazy with my questions so I could learn. And with Manager Goodwin, again, half-hour meeting the next day after I asked if it's please possible. So it's just a good time to recognize that. Like every time I've asked a question of these staff, I've instantly had a meeting to help walk me through it, and I really do appreciate that. So thanks.
Thank you. I agree. We have mover and seconder. All in favor? And that's passed. Next, we have item 916. Hang on while I shuffle papers here. And 916 is Mill Pond Bridge pedestrian deck update. And I believe, Councillor Ashmore, you have it extracted for this afternoon. Did you want to move it this morning and then, or did you have something else you proposed?
Just to sort of explain what happened here, like we built the new bridge, which is excellent bridge and on budget, by the way, and we actually have $100,000 under budget, which is great. So last fall, I guess it was, or last summer, I put forward a memo. The only one issue that people said they had was the cantilever, the pedestrian walkway, and that they were finding it difficulty, the surface for strollers, for scooters, for people walking pets, that the openings were too big. And Director Rojas said that it's a similar mesh screen that we have underneath the Wellington Street Bridge here. So I took a look, and sure enough, it is the same thing. If we were to change the deck or the walkway, apparently we would have to close the pedestrian walkway for the winter months, so 6 months. I don't think people would be too happy with that. So I think, just for the time being, we can just leave this. It would be nice to get, I've looked at other different types of surfaces, but you need something that's a little bit smoother. It would be nice for people to walk over. I mean, people are very happy with the bridge, like I said, and it was done and on time and under budget, which was great. But there are funds in there to remedy this small issue that we have, but in some ways it's not a small issue. Some people are finding it difficult to actually walk on that surface. So maybe we'll just leave it for staff we'll keep working with engineering and see if maybe we might be able to find another solution. So the funds are already there, so I'm okay with it right now, just to receive it.
Motion as printed.
Yes, please.
And seconder, Deputy Mayor Richardson. All in favor? And that's passed. Next item is a memo from Councillor Ashmore on the Cedar Glen docking. Did you want to refer this to council this afternoon?
Yeah, that's fine. I can refer it to council.
Okay.
Council meeting.
So it's a receive and referral to council this afternoon. Moved by Councillor Ashmore, seconded Councillor McDonald. All in favor? And that's passed. And our last item is on the Rioboro Park postal boxes, and again, it's Councillor Ashmore. Did you want to refer that to this afternoon?
Actually, I think it's okay the way it is right now. We can just receive it. What's sort of transpired is that, I know it may sound like a little thing, but it actually, and it may be perceived that it's just an issue of Canada Post, but it actually affects the city. So Public Works, Engineering, and Parks and Recreation, and Parks Community Services. So I talked to the representative of Canada Post yesterday. I was in Rayboro, and he was there actually, but anyways, we talked on the phone, and there are 3 other potential sites that they're going to be moving these boxes, and they've caused some issues where they are. But I think one of the points maybe I should just raise is that that whole start of this whole thing was that a consent was given without really any consultation. I'm just wondering, maybe from now on, like if there is a consent given, that, you know, people locally or local member council could be consulted just in case something like this happens. I mean, it's not a, you know, really dangerous per se issue, but it has been an annoyance for people. But I just would be good if we do issue these consents to external parties, especially, you know, federal government, Canada Post in this case, that we're informed about it. So it could prevent in the future something like what we've sort of been going through in Rayboro. That's all it is. Right now we're working with Canada Post to change the location, and then we're going to have to probably involve Public Works for the roadways, and maybe Community Services. We might be able to put it into the park entrance. So I think it's good for now. We'll just receive it. So I'm working on it. So.
Okay, so we'll refer to this afternoon. My thought on it is, if they're going to appoint a postmaster in Rioboro, then they won't need the post boxes. So it's kind of, I don't want to do a make work project where we move the boxes, then they appoint a postmaster and the boxes are disappeared. Let's wait and see if they abandon their idea or are unable to find a post person.
As of yesterday, nobody has even applied, so unfortunately nobody's expressed any interest to be the postmaster of Rayboro, which is unfortunate. So, but maybe they might step up to the plate in the next few days.
So do you want to remove this memo from consideration for this afternoon?
Yeah, I think it's fine. Well, we've received it.
Okay, so yeah. Let's receive it, and the motion is to remove it from this afternoon's agenda. Moved by Councillor Ashmore, second by... Just to receive, okay. So Councillor Warren, all in favor? And that's passed. That completes everything on the agenda for Committee of the Whole from April 4th. So we will adjourn and come back here for 1 o'clock for council meeting. And so I need a motion to adjourn. Councillor Yeo, Councillor Perry, all in favor? And that's passed.